as if carved into the sky itself. Here's the terrifying part. This is not a movie effect, and it's not a hoax. Last night, over a small town in Texas, the night sky lit up with something no one could explain, a massive glowing cross suspended above the horizon. Witnesses say it wasn't a cloud, it wasn't light beams, it was a shape burning through the darkness, sharp and unmistakable.
We were told to expect tremors at the end. But when cracks run deeper than fault lines beneath ancient stone where hope battles, or hostility, do you see just chaos? Or a prophecy unfolding in real time? The very place where Jesus once prayed and ascended into heaven began to tremble. Scientists call it pressure displacement, predictable and minor. Prophets gave it another name long before any seismograph existed. For centuries, a quake was foretold to split this hill, opening a way for those escaping the last great conflict. Now, in 2025, the Mount of Olives, once host to prayers, ascension, promise, has shifted upward, becoming the stage for movement, both literal and spiritual. As these stories of prophecy and geology intertwine in the present, Jerusalem's sacred ground seems to demand our attention. Pause with me before we go further and consider, what does it mean when tremors echo not only in the earth, but also beneath beliefs? If the mountain is shifting, what else in our world or our faith is about to move? If you feel the ground shifting beneath your beliefs, don't watch alone. Like, share, and subscribe. Join the world as it waits for what comes next. It was not a single siren, nor a government order, that triggered the movement. In autumn 2025, as fault lines split the Mount of Olives and conflict displaced thousands across the region, a quieter exodus took shape, this time not only in Gaza or Jerusalem, but reverberating far beyond. In West Bank villages, the olive harvest was interrupted by violence and military cordons. Pilgrims arrived for Holy Week processions in a city under alert, their numbers thinner, their prayers more urgent than ever. Christian families from Bethlehem to Nazareth debated whether to remain or join the wave of departures. For many in Gaza and East Jerusalem, the decision was made for them by official expulsion or the threat of crossfire. News feeds filled with images of overcrowded border crossings, makeshift convoys winding north through the valleys, and cemeteries in Gaza, becoming overnight shelters for the displaced. In Rome, Manila, Nairobi, congregations watched live streams from Jerusalem and whispered, "If the holy ground is breaking, are we next?" Across Orthodox, Catholic, and Protestant churches, a surge of dreams, visions, urgent communiques swept through faith communities, a longing to move, to flee, or to gather, each heart reading the moment as crisis or calling. Governments scrambled to secure their nationals. The UN warned of humanitarian collapse, but in house groups and hilltop services, a different language prevailed: prophecy, exodus, deliverance. For the first time in generations, world headlines and pulpit warnings seemed to point in the same direction. Get ready to move, to choose, to witness whatever comes next. This is not the neat departure of old scripture, but a restless convergence, families and strangers, faithful and frightened, all swept up in the uncertainty of a world cracking open beneath their feet. And as night falls across the divided hills, a hush settles, as if even history is waiting to see which story will be written this time. History may pause for breath, but memory never sleeps. As families crossed into uncertainty and news feeds looped with images of abandoned streets, another undercurrent began to rise, a memory the land itself seemed to hold. For the Mount of Olives is no ordinary backdrop to human movement. For thousands of years, this ridge has surfaced in the world's most urgent hopes and darkest reckonings. Prophets once stood here, warning of days when the mountain itself would cleave in two, carving out a valley of escape amid crisis. From Zechariah's vision of feet touching stone and splitting the hill from east to west, to the olive-stained nights when Jesus prayed before arrest, the Mount has always blurred the line between legend and reality. In churches from East Jerusalem to the hills of Italy, sermons echo with these verses. Some cite Zechariah, others recall the gospel scenes where the hillside became a stage for betrayal, grief, and final promise. All remember tales of division, not only in rock, but in the destiny of nations and souls. It's here the ancient belief takes form, that when the earth moves here, it is a sign for those longing for deliverance and trembling at the possibility of judgment. Now, as scientists debate tectonic stress and politicians coordinate evacuations, those who have slept and prayed in the shadow of these olives find themselves wondering, are we repeating a cycle foretold? Does today's migration mirror the ancient exodus, each footstep a part of some deeper, ongoing summons? The ground is not a passive witness. On these slopes, hope and anxiety have always run parallel. And every tremor, whether measured by machines or by memory, carries a question. If this rift was promised, what else might history be waiting to fulfill? The headlines, at first, trickled in quietly. In late July 2025, surveyors and geologists on site in Jerusalem confirmed a new crack snaking across the Mount of Olives east to west, echoing the very direction described in Zechariah's ancient prophecy. Local authorities admitted there had been no major quake, no seismic event, only the stone itself splitting, pushing apart with a force none could easily explain. Scientists described it as subtle but real, the mountain shifting centimeters, shifting history. Archival footage showed tombs knocked askew, olive trees tilting, and nervous pilgrims trailing their hands over the fissure's fresh edge. Some worried, some prayed. All watched as a city shaped by centuries seemed to alter its face overnight. Experts were unsettled. Israeli geologists pointed out this was not a remnant of the 1927 earthquake, but something new, something actively progressing. Jerusalem, they warned, sits atop a major fault line running from the Rift Valley. Archaeologists quietly admitted that the timing was uncanny. A renowned scholar told reporters, "The cracks are not just in the stones. They are in the timeline of history itself." In neighborhoods closest to the split, ordinary routines dissolved, processions rerouted, markets emptied, families reconsidered century-old burial plots as fissures ran through their ancestors' resting places. For Jerusalem's faithful, this break in the ground was more than geology. It was the echo of promises, warnings, and hope. And as the city hesitated over church bells and speakers, a deeper undercurrent remained. If the sacred stone is splitting, are we witnessing the fulfillment of an old vision or the emergence of a new crisis? Pages flicker open to Zechariah 14:4. On that day, his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives, and the mount shall be split in two, from east to west. Its imagery suddenly stamped across headlines and Instagram feeds. Yet, the Bible rarely offers answers as simple as we wish. For every prophecy that seems to unfold in stone and soil, another passage whispers caution. Matthew recalls Jesus weeping over Jerusalem, warning disciples that not one stone would be left on another. Luke speaks of flight to the mountains in the time of trial. Acts remembers ascension, and Ezekiel patterns hope through exile and return. But the Mount of Olives isn't the world's only trembling landmark. In recent years, fault lines have split open across continents, a continent-wide rift stretching through East Africa, the San Andreas Fault rumbling in California, the Anatolian Plate shifting beneath Turkey's cities, and sudden cracks lacing the ground of Chile and Japan. Each event is explained by science. Each leaves communities shaken, infrastructure broken, and stories of survival etched in memory. In Ethiopia, villagers watch as land divides their crops and homes. On the American West Coast, families live with emergency drills and tremor maps as part of life. In Turkey and Syria, quakes have split the earth and societies, forcing migrations overnight that uproot millions. Headlines follow each new tremor. Images of roads torn apart, houses at angles, rivers diverted from their course. Yet amid this litany of natural disaster, something else begins to echo, a sense that the Earth's convulsions mirror deeper separations in our world. Social networks light up with comparisons. Some see Jerusalem's fracture as a warning for the planet, a headline not just of prophecy, but of global instability. Journalists ponder whether humanity's divides, whether political or spiritual, are themselves a kind of seismic tension now erupting. Pastors link the language of fault lines with questions about faith, unity, and fate. Some ask, if ancient stones can crack after centuries, what hope do our institutions or communities have of standing firm? Scripture never promised that walls built by human hands would last forever. Psalm 46 declares, God is our refuge and strength. Though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, we will not fear. In the shadow of the Mount of Olives' new crack, these words take on raw urgency. If the ancient stones can break, what hope remains for church towers or parliaments, alliances or social contracts forged in quieter times? The history of faith is a record of both collapse and transformation. Jerusalem's own story is written in layers, walls destroyed and rebuilt, communities scattered, then gathered again, covenants broken, and new ones sealed by blood, tears, or resolve. On every continent, the ground seems to promise only one certainty: that change will come, often without warning. It may arrive as a visible split in the soil, or as a silent rupture between neighbors. The Mount of Olives has become a metaphor for these global tremors, as much about the stories we tell as the science we measure. The more the earth divides, the more we find ourselves searching not just for stability, but for meaning. Are these fractures calling us to pay attention to history, to prophecy, to one another? Or are they reminders that even the firmest ground can shift beneath our feet? The Psalms remind us, the earth melts, nations are in uproar. Be still, and know that I am God. Psalm 46. These words urge us to look beyond panic and confusion, to read the tremor as a call not only to fear, but to understanding and invitation to reflect on what is steady, who is near, and why crisis often precedes mercy. Jesus himself looked at Jerusalem and wept over its inability to recognize the time of visitation. Luke 19:44. Warning that those who ignore warning signs risk missing both the peril and the promise. Paul tells us, all creation groans, and so do we, longing for renewal, for clarity, for a future made by more than stone. So yes, the fractures, ancient and new, are a message to pay closer attention to history's patterns, to prophecy's voice, and, above all, to each other. Each fault line is both warning and hope, shaking us awake. to see that strength is not found only in unmoved ground, but in the bonds and awareness we form as the earth shifts. We are called not simply to stand firm, but to be alert, to connect, and to prepare ourselves for what comes next. Ultimately, Scripture suggests that when the foundations tremble, it is time to listen with new humility to history, to prophecy, and to the stirrings of community. The firmest ground may shift, but the deepest lessons emerge only if we dare to notice. As the cracks widen across Jerusalem and families pack for the unknown, another ancient question resurfaces. Who, in moments of upheaval, are the chosen? And what qualifies someone to go, to stay, or to lead? Scripture is full of dividing lines and selections, both mysterious and revealing. In the days of Noah, it was not the powerful or popular who entered the ark, but those who walked with God. Genesis 6-9. The Exodus, too, was not only a matter of bloodline, but of trust. Those who believed the promise and marked their doors passed through unchanged, while the rest faced devastation. Exodus 12. In the New Testament accounts of the rapture, Paul and Jesus both indicate that it is not appearances, but readiness of the heart that determines who will be taken and who left behind. Matthew 24:40-42. 1 Thessalonians 4:16, 1:7. Today's evacuation is stunningly diverse. Social media paints a picture riven with paradox. Young people, according to recent surveys, are as likely to be moved by fear of conflict as by faith in prophecy. Hashtags like number leaving Jerusalem, number chosen people, number final exodus trend globally. Online polls show more than half of Christian teens see current events as a sign of something bigger coming. But many openly debate what faithfulness means in a time without clear leaders or precedents. Contrary to expectation, those packing up are not solely the devout or the desperate. Among the crowds are secular families fleeing violence, journalists seeking the next headline, and elders carrying childhood Bibles alongside battered passports. Once homogeneous neighborhoods now hold a mix of exhausted skeptics and fervent believers. Urban planners map evacuation routes, but pastors remind their flocks of the mystery of selection, referenced in both Old and New Testaments. The Bible warns that at the hour of trial, the lines dividing people may not be seen until the moment passes. Not all who say, "Lord, Lord," will enter the kingdom, but only the one who does the will of my Father. Matthew 7:21. Prophecy asks not merely if we're moving, but why and whether our hearts are tuned to fear, to habit, or to hope. As cracks mirror splits in family, faith, and society, the story of who moves becomes as crucial as where they go. Each journey is colored by ancient longing and modern anxiety, leaving us in this hour of converging crises to wonder, in the ultimate test, what will define the chosen their footsteps on shifting ground, or the courage to trust a promise they cannot yet see? When the tremors fade and the dust settles over Jerusalem's fractured hills, what remains isn't just a scar on the landscape. It's the shift in how we see the ground beneath our collective and individual stories. As news crews retreat and governments issue cautious statements, the city returns to a tense kind of waiting. Market stalls reopen tentatively. Families string lanterns across fissured courtyards, and children test the echo of old songs among the olive groves. But under the surface, nothing feels quite the same. For those who witnessed the movement or joined the evacuation, a new anxiety lingers. What if the world's next turning point is no longer distant history or prophecy, but a living, evolving moment in their own story? This is not the first time Jerusalem has stood at such a threshold. The city's walls are layered with memory. Babylonian siege towers, Roman roads, Crusader battlements, vanished boundaries, and rebuilt hopes. Each generation inherited tales of exile and deliverance, of sudden flight and miraculous return. But today, the drama feels both older and newer, as if the ancient dreams and contemporary dangers have finally converged. Scholars and preachers debate. Is the Mount's fracture a literal fulfillment of Zechariah, or a natural accident? Does it signal an approaching rapture, a looming judgment, or a chance for radical renewal? Around kitchen tables and in encrypted chat rooms, the questions become intensely personal. Some parents explain the signs as a warning to keep watch and pray. Others counsel their children to trust the science and stay calm. In both comfort and uncertainty, the lines between faith, fear, and future have grown thin indeed. History, too, is shaped by those very moments. Those who stayed in Jerusalem after the Babylonian exile became the keepers of ruins and promise alike. The ones who left scattered to Babylon, Egypt, later Rome and Europe, built new lives, carrying faith like a seed in their hearts. The historian Josephus tells how, after the city's destruction, secret worship continued in caves and ruins. The prophet Ezekiel, writing from exile, called his people not simply to mourn or await return, but to seek the welfare of the city in whatever new place God scattered them. But the fractures of 2025 occur in a changed world. Unlike any era before, movement is instant and information global. A drone's video from the Mount of Olives circulates from Tel Aviv to Sao Paulo in seconds. Hashtags from Manila, Lagos, and Ontario synchronize global responses. Sometimes panic, often prayer, always speculation. Churches post live stream services, rabbis host digital panels from the safety of diaspora homes, and, at the center, Jerusalem's hills hold their silence. If past generations looked to the stars or tabernacle for divine signals, today's world reads omens in the shifting data. Statistical tremors, trending topics, satellite images. Algorithms try to predict the next exodus or the next sign. But for all our analysis, the big questions remain unchanged. Why here? Why now? Whose story is about to turn a page? The Scripture's deeper call is to hold all these meanings in tension. The psalmist promises that God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble, even if the mountains fall into the sea. Psalm 46. Jesus, whose own feet touched the olive slopes, taught that every crisis is both a test and an opportunity. When you see these things happening, stand up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. Luke 21-28. Paul urged his generation not to be alarmed, but to encourage one another with these words. 1 Thessalonians 4:18. Because the ultimate hope is not in avoiding the tremor, but learning perseverance and community within it. And what of us, this generation, this global audience, who stand on the edge of prophecy and peril? We inherit a world more connected and more vulnerable than ever. Our families are scattered across borders, our churches split by politics and dreams, our hearts pulled between memory and anticipation. The Mount's split, whether read as geologic, symbolic, or divine, shakes each of us into facing what we most fear and long for. On these slopes, hope and anxiety always run together, urging us to choose not just which history to believe, but what future to build. Perhaps then, this generation's exodus isn't a solitary event, but an ongoing process, a test of compassion, faith, and imagination as much as survival. Just as the ancient Israelites followed pillars of fire and cloud into a land unknown, so too are we called to move, sometimes physically, more often in mind and soul when the time comes. The chosen, maybe not the ones most prepared, but those willing to heed a call, to reach out, to risk trust and connection when old certainties falter. In the end, the promise may not be the absence of tremors, but the presence of a guide. Wherever we are among cracked gravestones in Jerusalem, among churches at the world's edge, or watching from a quiet room thousands of miles away, the call is the same. Watch, remember, pray, and act with courage. For every split in the ground invites a choice. Every uncertainty is an opportunity for mercy. And in every shaking, the foundations of hope might, once more, be laid. Across continents, calls and confessions echo. A priest from Nairobi logs into a global roundtable, sharing how his congregation, mostly young adults, prayed through the night as news of Jerusalem's split broke. Their anxiety is familiar, but the questions feel new. How do you prepare to move when you don't know the destination? A Palestinian grandmother, her family now scattered between Gaza and Cyprus, recounts memories of 3 exoduses each, more confusing than the last. Her voice, steady but worn, asks simply, "Is this another beginning, or the end of our patience?" Online forums burst with testimonies. An American youth who walked out into a blizzard, inspired by a dream. A Filipino nurse who hung colored prayer cloths each day, unsure if she'd be called as part of the chosen she's heard about since childhood. Alongside these public movements, scholars gather records of previous world-shaking events. The Siloam Pool excavation, the Dead Sea Scroll finds, and the recurring waves of mass dispersal in Jerusalem's history take on new relevance. Specialists in trauma highlight the challenge. Uncertainty erodes not just walls and roads, but trust, optimism, the simple ability to live in tomorrow. Yet, seasoned therapists also argue that such moments trigger renewal, a forced adaptation, a developed empathy for those long on the margins. Peer into the homes abandoned during evacuation, and you'll find relics of faith left behind. Prayer books, icons, handwritten notes. Even the homeless find ways to carry fragments in a pocket, a memory, a word of promise. For many, being chosen is less a matter of being called than being sustained, enduring the distance between dividing lines, holding on to what is possible when the known world collapses. Meanwhile, governments attempt control. Maps are redrawn, routes rerouted, citizenship and ethnicity challenged. But every bureaucratic solution feels temporary, for the ground underfoot continues to move. Disaster planners and diplomats debate thresholds for final hour decisions. Anthropologists document shifting ethnic and religious ties, suggesting that new communities will form in the wake of every rupture if trust can be rebuilt, if wounds can heal. Jerusalem's scar is no longer just the city's concern. It is now the world's. Visible in every shaken church and agitated family, echoed in policy debates and bedtime prayers. And when the mountain splits, it is not only holy ground that divides, it is the hopes and anxieties of all humanity. In this way, prophecy is both fulfilled and begun again with each soul who chooses to pay attention, to reach out, to build anew when the foundation crumbles. To close, the ancient call remains, "Choose this day whom you will serve." As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Joshua 24-15. For some, this means evacuation. For others, endurance. For all, It means living with eyes open, willing to be shaped by trembling as well as triumph. If you feel the ground shifting beneath your beliefs, don't watch alone. Like, share, and comment below. Tell us your experience, your questions, your hope. This moment is not the end of the story, but the invitation to write the next chapter together. The story of the Mount of Olives splitting is a powerful reminder that biblical prophecy often engages both the physical and spiritual worlds. In Zechariah 14:4, we read of a day when the mountain divides, offering refuge amid great trial. Jesus himself prayed here, warning that future signs, a world shaken, foundations split, would be moments to awaken faith, not surrender to fear. Matthew 24:32, 3-5. Scripture teaches that earthquakes,